The Banshee, or Beansay in Gaelic, holds a special place in this author's heart, as special a place it can hold, that is. I first sought out the Wailing Woman while 19 years old, traveling in the Aran Islands. It did not take long for me to hear the terrifying keening that is her calling card, as it were. The Banshee scream, or its keen, is at once siren-like and repulsive, like the scent of rotting meat or vomit. It is most certainly a song, and its lyrics are immediately discernible. My notes contain the following couplet: "If rest and comfort only is all thou desire/attend then upon me, and caress the gold lyre." Tradition holds that the keening is a harbinger of death. This is not strictly true. It simply means that at midnight, the Wailing Woman will present herself seeking your body for sustenance. She is a strikingly beautiful but gaunt woman dressed in a pale white dress. She floats half a meter above the ground and does not appear to possess feet. Her skin is a strong white, and her eyes are milky and pupil-less. She is not the most accomplished wrestler in the bestiary, that honor belongs to the Minotaur, but she is no pushover. Her ability to levitate along with her ear-splitting scream are powerful weapons. Be sure to bring a silver blade, it is the only substance which may pierce her skin. In order to fully kill her, you must sever her vocal cords. They are incredibly taut and produce a sharp, musical twang when cut. Leave the body where it lies. The Irish are familiar with what to do after this. Angel22.jpg. The angel's inclusion in this bestiary will no doubt prove controversial. I myself offer that the only angels requiring dispatching are fallen ones, and thus it is the duty of all good pumen to slay them wherever they're found. Profoundly beautiful, wearing unsullied white robes, possessing large eyes without pupils and endowed with incredible strength, the angel is rarely if ever encountered by even the most ambitious student of cryptozoology. I myself had been in the field nearly 12 years before encountering one named Gaz in Lebanon. He claimed to be the devil who tempted Christ, and offered me the 4 keys which give a man eternal life. I refused. His first blow left a deep impression in my stomach which is still barely visible now. To this day I have no idea how I managed to stand and level my revolver at him. Angels are swift but are bound to doing violence only through conventional physical contact, that is, using the head and limbs. They are fine wrestlers and boxers, but all angelic swordsmen defend heaven. I was lucky not to come across the 6 solemn archangels. This messenger was dispatched with 2 rounds of silver to the chest. It should be noted that upon death an angel emits a sound like a trumpet, and his colleagues, hell-bound or not, will come to carry his body home. I have only borne witness to such a spectacle once. I assure you, once was enough. The Brownie is a small, unimpressive-looking demon found within the British Isles. They call themselves the Urisk, but nomenclature aside, the Brownie is a more daunting adversary than would appear. Brownies are masters of deception, fading in and out of darkness and light, able to manipulate the forest in order to achieve its goals. This author remains confused by his encounters with the Urisk. They appear at times to be playful and benevolent beasts, at other times mischievous, and rarely, psychotically violent. The Brownie, dressed in the clothing of English or Irish dandies, would seem a laughable threat. I bear the marks of their teeth in my left side to prove otherwise. Dazzlingly fast and clever, they use their razor-sharp teeth and small shivs to make short work of opponents. They do have weaknesses beyond the physical, however. Brownies love to gamble. Challenge the Brownie to a bet. Bet him your life against his on a coin toss. He will likely produce his own 2-headed coin, but bring yours in case he doesn't. If either coin is revealed a fake, agree to a legitimate one. If you lose, you can still break the bet and murder him. The Brownie is simply incapable of conceiving this option and will voluntarily die. Modern psychiatry holds that the concept of demonic possession was a primitive way to explain schizophrenia, mania, and psychotic behavior. Surely many schizophrenics were punished for their infirmities in darker times, but possession by disembodied spirits or demons is more common than modern science suspects. The telltale signs of possession are the afflicted's ability to prophesy or see the future, to speak in ancient or dead languages, possessing incredible strength or stamina, change of eye or hair color, change of skin color, change of voice. Killing the possessed is in fact killing the demon inhabiting the possessed, and this requires considerable finesse. A daring tactician, the demon will lie, self-mutilate, even risk suicide in an attempt to kill or deter the exorcist from performing his task. Use of the Catholic rites of exorcism fell out of favor in the early part of the 20th century but are still used in times of extreme emergency. It is likely impossible to coax a demon out of a human body. This will ensure its return to hell, a plane of existence even demons dislike, but forcing it to leave can be accomplished by mesmerizing the afflicted and then performing the rites in Latin, preparing a bath of holy water and forcing the afflicted to receive communion. offering another body to the demon. The final option is the most likely to succeed, offering it the body of a less desirable human. Convicts prove a good substitute, will enable you to kill both human and demon with little guilt. The Varley is an uncommon demon of uncertain origin. Some maintain that it is a flame literally possessed by a malevolent spirit. If this is true, there is no reason given as to why a spirit would choose to embody a flame. Regardless, they are fascinating and incredibly destructive monsters. Often described as a pillar of flame, the Varley can twist and bend its shape to suit its purpose, which is almost certainly mass death. A Varley caused the Great Fire of London in 1666, only to be destroyed by the Duke of York, later James II, using a high-pressure water cannon. This is one of the methods to extinguish a Varley. A more uncommon but perhaps more effective method is to flash freeze it using a chemical spray of some kind. This may cause the Varley to become a physical element, which in turn can be interred. The Varley is likely to return after the ice melts. This author recommends sealing it in a mine or a well of some kind. From Borges's invaluable Book of Imaginary Beings, suggested or inspired by mirrors, the surface of still water, and twins. In Germany it is called the doppelganger, in Scotland, the fetch, because it comes to fetch men to their death. Meeting oneself was, therefore, most ominous. p. 62, the fetch is by far the most dangerous creature encountered by the author. I first was confronted by a fetch several years ago on the streets of Venice. Upon seeing me he turned and disappeared into the side streets off St. Mark's Square. It took me nearly 6 hours to murder him, driving a sharp piece of stone into his ribs until he expired. Contrary to tradition, there exist unlimited numbers of doubles for each person, but they all share some things in common. First, the fetch, wherever he originates from, is a mystery, wants only to murder and replace you. He will contrive to do this through artifice. Have you ever heard of someone surviving a terrible car accident without a single scratch? Or through direct violence, a la my double in Italy. They are your match in strength, wits, even personality, and herein lies her difficulty. While an immensely strong creature might have some weakness unknown to itself, the fetch knows what it must guard and what it must strike. The fight itself is always brutal and indescribably chilling. How else should one feel, bashing their mirror image to death with a heavy stone? The basilisk is a potent reptilian beast, about 6 feet tall. It crawls on its 4 legs until it rears up to strike, when it stands on its 2 hind legs and expands its chest into a concave expanse, enabling its armored scales to slide aside and reveal its poison glands. The poison is, without doubt, the most deadly in the Crypta kingdom. There have been claims of an antidote, composed half of virgin blood and half of mercury. The antidote's composition is as ridiculous as its purpose. The poison kills within moments, causing the veins to rise out of the skin and burst, the stomach and other internal organs to liquefy and evacuate by the mouth and nostrils. Unfortunately, the basilisk is invulnerable to conventional harm while in its pursuing, and grounded, state. When ready to attack, however, high-pitched noises will split the creature's scales, ensuring a fair fight. Tradition suggests fooling a rooster to crow when it is exposed. Nowadays a portable device can produce a high-pitched tone with far less work required. Do not attempt close combat. The poison glands of the beast spill open when split. Projectiles are an absolute necessity in slaying the creature. Once it has been killed, immolate its corpse. The fumes that result allow some to see future events before they occur. While the dead can take many forms, the most troubled dead man is one without a body. The ghost is unlikely to be either benevolent or malevolent. All research points to a higher, or far lower, understanding of morality on the plane of the dead. Each ghost, having drunk from the river Nepenthe, has no mercy or memory, only a strong emotional link to the physical realm. Hence the common image of a ghost wrapped in chains. It is not possible to do physical damage to the ghost. He will likely be able to manipulate objects, see poltergeists, or produce terrifying hallucinations, see apparitions. It is also impossible to reason with a ghost. Unlike vampires or leeches, who, beaten in argument, must show mercy. Being purely an emotional phantasm, they are powerful, dangerous things. Unable to discern friend from foe, the ghost is wont to attack or damage everything it can. That all said, ghosts do have serious weaknesses. They are deliberately concentrated in one place, hence haunted houses, prisons, etc. One option is simply to flee this area. If this area is one's home, however, there are certain ceremonies. The Beckwith Grimoire describes how to trap a soul and release it from the mortal plane. A box of plain cedar will be needed to contain the phantasm. Speaking in the ghost's native tongue, it could very well be a crapshoot, and reciting the Lord's Prayer, open your right wrist slightly and make the edges of the box slick with blood. Be careful not to lose too much bodily fluid. Lifting the lid, place the blade in the box and cover both of your eyes with either hand. You should hear shortly afterwards a loud, unnerving groaning, followed by a sharp exhale. Close the box. Bury it no less than 10 feet below the ground. The golem is the product of months of preparation, and therefore bears precious few weaknesses. Being a mindless creature of vengeance, the golem cannot speak. It possesses the wiles one might find in a hound or a bear. Conjured by a desperate and certainly mad rabbi, the golem should be destroyed the moment it is sighted. Countless lives will be lost should it have free rein to pull down buildings and crush innocents. The golem should have the Hebrew word emet inscribed somewhere on its body. This word, truth, gives the golem its animating force. By effacing or wiping away the e, the word becomes met, death, and the golem should turn into liquid clay. A firearm may accomplish this purpose, so may a fine blade. The best tactic is to convince a child to rob away the e, as golems are physically unable to kill children. Doting on them as a mother does her own slaying the golem is not an end by any means. You must contrive to find and murder the rabbi who summoned the golem, for he is certain to attempt to raise another, and another, and another, until he expires or the creation kills its creator. Kraken are the enormous bane of all deep-sea sailors. Although modern science believes that the gigantic squid is the inspiration for kraken, they are sorely mistaken. Kraken, according to legend, dwarf even the greatest of whales, and the gigantic squid is proven to be dwarfed by the blue whale. Long before Tennyson wrote his poem on the beast and incorrectly added the modifier the Norse were familiar, indeed, intimate with this creature. The Eddas speak of many a sailor swept into the froth by the boat-splitting monster, whose tentacles are able to wrap around castles. Fortunately, murdering kraken is simpler than it seems. Ensure it surfaces first before injecting it with a massive dose of tetrodotoxin, a poison found in the Japanese blowfish. As kraken are native to the North Atlantic, they are unacquainted and therefore vulnerable to this very potent poison. The creature should expire, and under its own great weight, sink below the ocean. The mermaid, a portmanteau of the Latin word sea and the Middle English for woman, is, typical of the field, grossly misrepresented by literature and contemporary representation. First discovered by Alexander the Great while campaigning in northern Egypt, the race of sea-dwelling humans immediately allied itself with his armies and aided him with whispered intelligence regarding the movement of his enemies on the ocean. Some evidence exists for a previous encounter by Achilles, consorting with the mermaid Thetis, during the war for Lium. Achilles supposedly waved away suspicion from his fellow soldiers by claiming the creature was his motherly goddess. Traders and master storytellers, mermaids are also the origin for the Platonic fable of Atlantis, a city which did in fact exist for a brief time on the island of Malta. Herodotus notes that the island is full of those who swim with ease, an epithet denoting their gills and webbed armpits, toes, fingers, and groins. Apart from this, mermaids, and mermen, are simply human. Dispatching a mermaid is fantastically difficult in the water. Their top speed was clocked by German sailors outside Narvik in spring of 1941 at 110 miles per hour, and within water both projectiles and physical motion are both dearly slowed. Nevertheless, there does exist a way to slay a mermaid with relative ease: the use of certain sonar beats. Mermaids have been decimated by the widespread use of sonar technology since its introduction in the early 30s, and most if not all have since retreated to deep caves within the mid-Atlantic ridge. The mumia, or mummy as it is now colloquially known, resembles its simpler cousin the zombie. Much maligned for its fragile appearance and lack of obvious strengths, the mummy seems a frail opponent at first. Take caution: like all creatures in this bestiary, the mummy is not to be trifled with. The mummy is second only to the Scottish fetch in cunning and vulpine calculation. Its body, while ancient, is stiffened by the bitumen necessary for its mummification and possesses incredible endurance. It is unlikely the mummy will present itself to you while you're near a firearm. They are known for their preparation before attacking and killing those who carry the mummy's curse, but a careful blow to the skull may shatter the bones of the monster and kill it. Nevertheless, close combat is not advised. A mummy's grip is fatal, and they are known for their ability to seize and choke a throat till their victim expires. It should be noted that fire or extreme cold can incapacitate the mummy. It should be further noted that freezing the creature will only delay its attack. To dispose of the creature, prepare a cauldron of lime or hydrochloric acid to disintegrate its limbs and appendages. Do not under any circumstances agree to a game of Senate, and under no circumstances should you pause, even if he speaks in the voice of your mother, your lover, your child. Shades, often thought to be simply the gestation of a double sea fetch, are actually a separate species altogether. They are unrelated to ghosts, sprites, or spirits, and inhabit the middle plane between life and death. Not fully dead or fully alive, the shade is said to be the astral form of a sorcerer. This may be true. The shade power lies in its ability to manipulate natural light. Waiting in dark corners, it can cast light that will produce a gigantic shape for itself to assume, thus creating a fearsome opponent of stature and strength. Wrestling the creature is ill-advised, you simply won't survive. Nevertheless, of all the creatures contained herein, the shade is the simplest to destroy. Illuminating a candle or a torch while the beast stands before you will force it into the shadows you create. One can slay a shade simply by staying within a well-lit room without any dominant shadows. Of course, the problem becomes a recurring nightly phenomenon. The eventual end to the cycle being your death or its growing disinterest. The Sphinx is a huge carnivore, originating from the eastern Mediterranean but now found worldwide, possessing what some believe to be the most agile and acute mind of the entire world. The first Sphinx was slain by the famous King Oedipus, who confronted the half-lion, half-woman fearlessly and answered her ancient riddle, which may or may not be the famous who walks puzzle we now ascribe to the incident. The Sphinx, bound to her own obscure and elegant laws, dutifully and patiently devoured herself until she bled out. Oedipus wore part of the Sphinx's coat until his death at Colonus. Some maintain it was this that led to his cursed fate. The Sphinx must of course be confronted by a clever and brave soul. Its riddle cannot be answered in a stutter or a stammer. This will enable it to feed on you. The riddle of the Sphinx is always one of three characteristics spoken in the What Am I format. The following is one encountered by the author: whoever makes me knows not. Whoever takes me knows me not. Whoever knows me wants me not. What am I? Such a riddle was one of the simpler ones. It should be noted that each riddle has an answer, unlike those asked by Dewey Leaches. For instance, a ship in a bottle. How does one remove the ship without disassembling it, destroying it, or bending it without altering the bottle? And can be answered within the space of one watch, roughly an hour and 10 minutes. The time can only be spent alone, and it can only be spent in concentration. Sleeping, summoning, or consulting other sources is forbidden. Should you answer the riddle correctly, the beast will devour itself. Otherwise, you will prove its next meal. The Wendigo, anglicized to Wendigo, is a fearsome relative of the werewolf or werebear, although strangely only extant in North America. Tradition holds that should any mortal consume enough human flesh under the full moon, he will become the Wendigo, a creature who can subsist on humans alone. Roughly 6 to 9 feet tall, wearing white or red fur, according to the season, the Wendigo does not, like the werewolf, return to human form. During day it will seek a cave or dig a hole for shelter and hunt during night. The Wendigo is famed for its tracking abilities, while a werewolf will tire of a hunt after 2 or 3 hours. The Wendigo will hunt by scent for weeks, some claim even months, hibernating in the daytime only to pick up the scent of its prey later that evening. Slaying the Wendigo requires a blade of some kind drenched, literally dripping, in human blood. While it is of course possible to use your own, this author recommends against it, as it will render you weak for the coming fight. The Wendigo will lay one carefully planned ambush, using its teeth to sever your throat while its forepaws will bat at your ribcage to crush your organs. If you survive the initial ambush, unlikely, the Wendigo will become disoriented and fight senselessly. You could slay the Wendigo will ease at this time. The pelt of the Wendigo is highly prized among American shamans, and may gain you a powerful ally as a gift. The succubi/incubi are fairly minor demons in comparison to creatures such as the Varley or the dragon, but their innate ability to seduce and captivate their victim makes them worthy adversaries. The succubi/incubi will never appear to a creature it cannot physically seduce. As of this writing, no lesbians have battled incubi, as this author has never encountered one either. Nevertheless, it can be assumed they share characteristics. Succubi assume the guise of the beholder's form of beauty. All women you have ever loved have only been poor, dim reflections of this beauty, and she burns with passion to couple with you. Producing the noises of coitus even as she approaches, the succubus can only touch you if you allow her to. Nevertheless, it is pure, incredible torture to not allow her embrace. Sirens are a close sister species to succubi, both possess incredible singing voices. Killing the temptress is as simple as it is excruciating. Dipping one's fingers in hot wax, while seizing the creature by the hair and burrowing one's thumbs into its eyes, will lead to its speedy demise. Its cries of mercy and pity are beautifully evocative and absolute fiction. Now that you have touched her, she has all the license she wants to kill you by sucking your brains out of your ear. A good pair of earplugs will prove a useful holding tactic in the struggle. Once blinded, the succubus will fold inward, wilting like a flower, until it scatters into dust. Some mystics opine that the succubus and the vampire are distant relatives. This author is likely to agree. Beasts of uncompromising stature and smell, Trolls are staples of both the child's nightmare and the crypto bestiary. Covered almost completely in red and brown hair, they emit a small amount of light from their eyes so as to see better in the dark. It's said that a troll sleeps under each and every bridge in the world. This author hasn't found this to be true. But like most folklore, it has the right idea. The troll is less a fighter and more a bureaucrat. Demanding a toll of 1 gold coin from every passerby, he plies a small business in intimidating and shocking those who still carry gold coins in this day and age. The rest are, depending on the troll, refused passage and admonished, or attacked and eaten. With jagged fangs and sharp claws, the troll is about as hard to kill as any modern Kodiak bear. A high-caliber firearm, axe, or any other conventional weapon will likely do the job. Of course, the easiest and by far least painful method is to run the troll over. How often do you walk across a bridge nowadays anyway? To start, a vampire is indeed a human being sired by another vampire. The first vampire is described in great detail within the Voynich manuscript. The illustrations are bewildering and misleading odds from the actual content of the text. Lilith, a washwoman in the Euphrates River Delta, managed to choke out a jinn, who in turn was required to grant her 3 wishes. She demanded immortal life and beauty and the ability to preserve whomever she liked. The jinn cursed her to the life of a dark-dwelling carnivore. The vampire has some limitations. It cannot enter a house if uninvited, it reveres and despises the cross, the crescent, and the Star of David, and of course its fatal weakness towards natural sunlight. This author recommends avoiding the vampire at all costs, but if this becomes an impossibility, a vampire can be killed, albeit with some difficulty. Not surprisingly, the most well-known method of slaying a vampire is the most impractical. Their fangs, which can extend to at least 5 inches off the jaw, rip flesh as quickly as a lion or wolf's, and they possess more stamina and holding power than either. If possible, one can sever the head of a vampire, thus destroying it, with a well-placed shot from a high-powered rifle or a scattergun. The 700 Nitro Express is an effective caliber. If possible, avail yourself the advantage of a Lamat revolver. Its lower barrel will turn any organic matter to a fine paste. His powder is an effective deterrent against further vampires if rubbed into the skin. Do not in any case attempt to wait out the clock. Will do anything to survive the coming sunlight, including dig a hole through the earth with its teeth. Do not speak with it, or look into its eyes. A silver pupil so fine you can see white in it, so tragic and beautiful that you burn to yield to it. As said, never look into its eyes. The sirens are also known as the harpies. Both are the same species of beast that have adapted to separate parts of the earth, the siren to the sea, the harpy to the air. It is said that the banshee is its land-dwelling cousin. This author suspects as much. Depicted in antiquity as a female head atop an eagle's body, the harpy is, just as the siren, a human being in all but its peculiar addition of wings. The sirens possess gills, and its dazzling singing voice. My notes from a journey in the Aegean have the following verse from a siren: if a song could prove death, would you, knowing it beautiful and knowing it true, break your chains, and your life lend, to hear such a song's stunning end? Should you prove strong enough to ignore their cries and still desire to murder such a creature, it can be accomplished. Killing it, like the succubus, is truly painful. The siren and harpy possess skin invulnerable to conventional weapons. Their vocal cords are the source of their power. Should one wrestle a harpy or a siren into submission and force open her mouth, pouring a fast sealing, and hopefully waterproof, epoxy or glue will damage their vocal cords and cut off her supply to oxygen. At this time you may be compelled to mercy. Do not yield. Indeed, the saddest songs I have ever heard have been the dirges of a dying siren or harpy. The jinn or genie, as it is colloquially known, is a possessor of rare talents and charms. According to Mohammedan tradition, they are creatures who attend church, raise crops, marry, and die. This is true. Unfortunately, slighting one will reveal a less human-like countenance. The jinn can indeed grant its famous 3 wishes, but only after being bested in combat and pinned. Once unable to struggle, it will yield and grant such wishes. Nevertheless, as creatures of remarkable memory and longevity, they will first contrive to ruin your life through the semantics of your wishes, and should this not produce your demise, slay you after the fact. The first vampire, Lilith, survived by wishing for immortality. Jacob, the patriarch of Israel, wished for the genie's blessing, thus ensuring its mercy. Arabs in all but matter, the jinn can be killed using dark, sharp stones. Obsidian, while fragile, proves an excellent substance for a blade. Piercing its stomach will produce the stench of death and disease. The jinn consume their victims and force them to eternal life in their stomachs. The imprisoned would thank you with their gratitude if they weren't already dead. Strictly speaking, the jinn should then fall into the sands. If possible, cover its body, as even after death genes may speak to relatives and heirs. The dragon belongs with the basilisk, the hydra, and the leviathan as the serpentine element of this bestiary. Written of since antiquity, the dragon has proved time and again to be constantly misrepresented and reinvented so as to fit an author's pen. With a wingspan of 20 to 30 feet, the dragon does indeed breathe fire, but only with every odd breath, possess reptilian characteristics, and guard a hoard of ancient treasure. Cave or mountain dwellers, dragons are not sentient by any means. Reasons as to why they guard their treasure run from the suggestion that dragons simply admire the luster of the objects to the idea that dragons are ancient bred guards of a race waiting to return and enjoy its wealth. The dragon can be slain using a blessed blade of silver. Unfortunately, the last known of these, Terminus Est, was demolished in an Allied bombing raid in 1943. More recent developments in science, though, have rendered the sword irrelevant. The dragon must breathe in huge amounts of oxygen in order to keep its lungs producing the flame which animates it. A gas such as hydrogen cyanide, released in large quantities, can kill a dragon while it is asleep or awake. Unfortunately, this will render the body unable for study, but no researcher has survived a fight with a dragon accepting the use of the above two methods. Its treasure is littered with the skulls of those it slew. Bury them properly, or the treasure's owner, eventual as he may be, will always bear the curse of long-dead knights and soldiers, unburied and unmourned. The brownie is a small, unimpressive-looking demon found within the British Isles. They call themselves the Urisk, but nomenclature aside, the brownie is a more daunting adversary than would appear. Brownies are masters of deception, fading in and out of darkness and light, able to manipulate the forest in order to achieve its goals. This author remains confused by his encounters with the Urisk. They appear at times to be playful and benevolent beasts, at other times mischievous, and rarely, psychotically violent. The brownie, dressed in the clothing of English or Irish dandies, would seem a laughable threat. I bear the marks of their teeth in my left side to prove otherwise. Dazzlingly fast and clever, they use their razor-sharp teeth and small shifts to make short work of opponents. They do have weaknesses beyond the physical, however. Brownies love to gamble. Challenge the brownie to a bet. Bet him your life against his on a coin toss. He will likely produce his own two-headed coin, but bring yours in case he doesn't. If either coin is revealed a fake, agree to a legitimate one. If you lose, you can still break the bet and murder him. The brownie is simply incapable of conceiving this option and will voluntarily die. The Lich, or Revenant, once ruled as a king, duke, or prince, possessing great wisdom and tact. Somehow, however, the Lich defiled the royal throne through his reign and was subsequently cursed by his surviving heirs. A good example is the English King John, signatory to the Magna Carta, who remains the eldest extant Lich on earth. Leeches revel in argument and enlightened discussion, medieval legend transforming the Leech's love of philosophy and alchemy to a remarkable skill in magic. This is absolute nonsense. The Leech's power lies in his intellect rather than in anything so petty and common as a spell book. The Leeches, like the Sphinx, are rather fond of riddles. The three encountered by this author, including the aforementioned John, asked first the following riddle: the man who made it gave it away, the man who bought it didn't need it, and the man who uses it doesn't know it. If you are capable of solving this rather elementary puzzle, you'll be treated to a night of elucidating discussion. In fact, much of the research for this volume has its roots in discussions with the dead royalty of Europe. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end, and the rising of the sun will lead the Lich to present you with an impossible riddle. Rather than puzzling over it, immediately append a container of rice, tacks, or coins and demand the Lich give you the exact number. The Lich will immediately become engrossed in counting, and you can flee. If he is still counting when the sun rises, he will be immolated in the manner of a vampire. King John is the only Lich known to this author able to ignore this query. Rather than counting them, the king refused and demanded an answer to his riddle. I was reduced to spending a mortifying hour inside the bell tower of Worcester Cathedral. The Lich ceased banging on the door and, presumably, returned underground. This author has not since returned to England.
By the fucking way, this post's pic related as actual fucking concept art. H.R. Giger wanted to make the aliens sexy, which should make you wonder what the fuck he had going on in his head. Truly sexual fantasies were on an entirely different, horrifying level than the rest of ours. His erotic dreams the stuff of nightmares to everyone else. If only 4chan had been invented sooner, he might have shared more with us before death took him.
I like to think of Giger and Beksinski as two sides of the artistic coin. Beksinski was deeply disturbed by the sadosexual hellscape nightmares he dreamed and put down to canvas. Giger stared into the abyss stared back, and Giger started stroking his dick through his pants until the abyss got uncomfortable and looked away. Giger stared into the abyss stared back, and Giger started stroking his dick through his pants until the abyss got uncomfortable and looked away using this.
Giger stared into the abyss stared back, and Giger started stroking his dick through his pants until the abyss got uncomfortable and looked away. I'm the anon you're replying to, and I wish I could fucking save this post so goddamn hard because have achieved next level cakes from the above green text, but I'm not on my computer. Fuck.
Be me. Childhood I was 11, live in shithole Tejas, woo. Typical I grew up on a farm life, cousins come and they want to walk around the property, good idea. JPEG, walking by horses area with big tree right by it. I've never been comfortable by the tree. Later that night we decide we want to go see the horses at night. So we walk up to them and try to get their attention. Cousin starts whistling. In Mexi culture you're not supposed to whistle late at night cause of lechuces. MFW realizing cousin probably fucked us over, pic related. Then I hear it. The loudest fucking screech. Yell at everyone like an autist to run back to house. Cousin who whistled fucking stayed behind. Immediately wake up oldest brother and tell him what's happening. He grabs the rifle and hands me a flashlight and tells me to follow him. We finally get back to our cousin. Claw marks all over his back and his clothes were torn, only one real seep. Had to tell parents. My dad told us we were very fucking lucky that that's all that happened. I got more stories from when I lived on the farm. 6. Do tell.
Story about why we never had pets. According to Mexi mother and grandmother, evil things lurk the most when you're alone. We used to have 2 dogs. 2 full-blooded red healers. Nice.jpg. 1 month goes by easy. Coming home from school one day I'm told to go our shed and get a shovel, digging holes to fix the fence I think. Oldest brother tells me to go inside. Lol, okay. Few hours later I'm told the dogs ran away. Alright, cool. 2 years later I asked my brother why we couldn't have pets. Tells me what happened to our dogs. Our dogs' throats were slit and were hanging on our fence. Tells me when bad things come it always goes for the pets first. I refused to get a pet anything ever since he told me what happened. Also can confirm this from my mom and older siblings about what happened to our dogs. I've seen a lot of shit and heard some shit. Glad we left that place before my senior year.
Hey, I got a good one for ya. Be me. Parents are divorced, at dad's for the time being, live beside woods greater than watching YouTube on the couch in the living room which has a huge ass window in it, think it used to actually be a garage or something, light turns on in the woods across the street at around 10 p.m. May, watching YouTube again. 2 hours later I get up cause I'm bored to go see what dad is doing, see that the light is in the exact same spot it was on at, didn't really question it, it wasn't too late quite yet. Shung out with dad and we watched A Quiet Place ending, made me keck, shotgun cock. Went back to couch to sleep on because guest bed is ass, realized the light is still on around 2 a.m. Man, who the fuck is up at this time of night? Get curious, woods is real close to me and the light was not far at all, decide fuck it. I'll just glance over there to see if everything is alright, go out, walk to the woods and look inside from the line which you enter, literally no one is using the light at all, just sitting there, pull out phone and take a picture, realize that there's a piece of paper in front of light, pick it up, there's a smile on it. Realize I'm in real bad spot at the moment, hear something in the distance, everything felt really quiet, couldn't see anything so picked up the bright ass light and still couldn't see anything near me, took a couple of pics and skimmed over them. Saw one that gave me the biggest goosebumps I've ever had, in the background you could see a pair of eyes, look up in the direction I saw it in the picture and it was to the right of me real close, near the tree that you will see in the picture here in a second. Flashlight wasn't directly on it but I could tell it was about 6 to 7 inches tall and it was anorexic as fuck. As soon as I glanced at that I booked it. Didn't hear anything chase me, not like I would anyways since it managed to somehow creep on me without making a peep. Run in the house, lock the doors, tell dad and call the police. Police can't find anything / trace of anything, ended up sleeping in the guest bedroom from then on.
This better be a hoax. Human eyes don't reflect light.
Be living in a house with some other dudes, basically nowhere. Outside of this city is just trees, particularly harsh winter. This night isn't so bad, power goes out. Are you afraid off dark? Nickelodeon. Look outside off my enclosed porch to see if I'm the only one. The whole area is out. I forgot to mention that I'm a bit of a photography fag. That comes into play here. Well, there is nothing to do around here. Think to myself that I never have seen such a mass power outage like this before. This might be a cool time to do a little bit of photography. Step outdoor, Feeling more anxious than usual. Just calm down, dude. Don't let this get the best of you. Continue on and take some cool photographs of car light trails. Also make a light penis. Lel. Can't shake the feeling that something has been following me. Getting really nervous. It's too windy to listen around me. Let's call it a night. Head back to house. Just no more picture.x. Take pic of the house I live in. Feeling really on edge. Almost panicky. What the fuck is going on? I never let myself get this bad. Really feel like I'm not the only one out here. Inside. Taking off boots and snow gear next to door. All of a sudden something slams into the door. I shit myself right there. Lock the door and get back to my room. Lock myself in there. Calm down enough to sleep. Next day I go through my pics. Light penis. Hey, get to the pic of my house. Shit. This picture of fucking creepy as hell. Can't believe my house looks like such a nightmare. Wait a second. Shadow doesn't look right. Look closer. Fucking got goosebumps writing this shit. Sorry for the length. What the fuck is that? See what looks like some guy with a pig head, staring right the fuck at me. I lose it. Ever since then I've been hearing banging around my house like a couple of times a week at night. Whatever the fuck that thing is, it wants in. I'm losing sleep over this. Pic related. It's the picture that I took.
My grandpa would never go in his attic, would never tell us why. Me and siblings grew up not really questioning it. All of us just knew that Pop wouldn't go in the attic. Whenever he needed something from it, we'd go get it for him. Totally normal attic. Never got any spooky vibes from it. Years later, Grandpa died peacefully in his sleep. I go stay with my grandma to keep her company. One night we're up late talking about old memories. Bring up the attic in a story. Grandma gets really quiet, asks if anyone ever talked to me about why he wouldn't go up there. Nope.jpg. She tells me that when they first moved into the house, Pop couldn't sleep. He said something about the house just didn't feel right. He paced all night like he was crazy. Went over every inch of the house with a fine-toothed comb. Grandma is really worried but doesn't say anything. One night he goes up into the attic. She hears him start screaming. She sprints up to the attic and finds him curled up in a ball. He's sobbing. Grandma asks him what happened. He looks up at her and tells her he figured it out. He points to where the eaves of the roof narrow down toward the far end. She looks. There's nothing there. Then she looks closer and sees something she can't really describe or explain. All she could compare it to was origami. It was like space was folded up on itself. The angles were all wrong. She said when she looked at it she could feel herself going crazy, like something inside her was melting. She drags Pop down the stairs and puts him to bed. He sleeps for 2 days. When he wakes up, he says he'll never go into the attic again as long as he lives. Never says another word about it. Ignores Grandma when she brings it up. Grandma goes quiet and I don't say anything. We moved on to other stuff and she hasn't brought it up again since. Turns out most of my family knows that part of the attic has always been blocked with a huge old bureau. Now I know why.
Be an army, be human fag, be talking to local national. Ask him about local ghost stories because I'm bored. He says that in his village there is a pale man with backwards legs who walks down the main road at night. Be on patrol in said village weeks later. Night vision. See said spooky thing. Know immediately it's not human. It vanishes quickly. Next day drive over an IED. It detonates on the truck behind me. 4 dead. Demon visits me that night in a sleep paralysis episode. Blows hot air on my face. Lose all sense of wonder and happiness. Ignorance is bliss anon.
About 12 to 13, lived in a pretty nice house. For some reason at around 10 p.m. every night for a month there was a single knock on my window. After a week just accepted it. Eventually just said out loud, "Can you stop in trying to sleep, cunt?" When it happened. Stopped a week later still, don't know why it happened. Whenever I looked out the window no one was there.
B15. Parents threw me out of the house at midnight for finding drugs in my room. Like hey give fuck.mp4. Pack my backpack and get a sleeping bag. It's summer so sleeping outside is no problem. Find a lonely spot in the industrial part of town. Put sleeping bag down on the edge of the parking lot that borders the building. Cozy little alcove. Go to sleep. Bit spooky being so alone and quiet but fall asleep. Wake up to hear liquid pattering down onto my sleeping bag. Fuck Rain Man. Wait, I'm in the alcove, how can it be raining on me? Poke head out of sleeping bag. Some guy pissing on me. What the fuck are you doing? Yell at him for being a creep. Get out of the sleeping bag to kick his ass. He runs off like a goddamn Kenyan. Fucking piss soaked sleeping bag, goddammit. Wait, this doesn't smell like piss. It was lighter fluid.
Out with my friend, sitting on a bench, be talking, people throwing us weird glances. Think it's because of the obscene topics, don't care, keep talking. Suddenly one old dude comes up to me. Excuse me, sir, But who are you talking to? I wish I was kidding. I've already made an appointment with a psychiatrist.
Grow up having nightmares about something in my childhood room. It looked like it had no skin, just muscles and organs. It would always crawl slowly from the hallway entrance, across the rug in the middle of the room. Right before it got to me, I would scream, but no sound would come out. I would feel as though I couldn't move and like all the energy in the room was being sucked into the closet. Pretty typical nightmare for a kid. I moved out a few years later to go live with my dad. My mom remarried, and her new husband's son moved into my childhood room. After a few months, the kid got sent away for behavioral problems. He had pissed in the corner of the room when he needed to pee. The walls were ruined. He had hidden poop and socks in a drawer, but one thing he did struck me as eerie. He had pounded finished nails into the floor, one nail every half-inch around the entrance to the room, one nail roughly every quarter-inch around the closet, which had the doors torn off. When they asked why he did it, the kid told them, "I had to be sure." Fucking made me turn my lights on. Nice.
Few weeks ago, out with buddy at park. About 100 minutes past dusk, walk into 30 by 30 meter pavilion, avidly invite any spirits and entities to manifest many times, orally, suddenly feel a potent deja vu. Friend looks at me and says, "Oh seriously," and books it to car. I follow. He told me he saw a white featureless face taller than me moving behind me. Chilled.
Be me, mid-20s, living alone, wake up in the dead of night, really odd abdominal cramps for some bizarre reason. No idea why. Go through to the bathroom, sit down and get ready to poop, straining, suddenly hear this really odd raspy, gurgling sort of rushing air sound like a balloon deflating. Whole room fills up with this awful smell of rotten meat out of nowhere. Hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Have this unreal feeling of dread. Whole house has gone dead silent. I live in the countryside and normally you can hear some animals at night at least. Cramps have gone, but there's no poop? There's literally nothing there. Freak out. Switch on all the lights, get my 12 gauge out of the closet and start shouting as loud as I can to scare away anything close by. Eventually calm down, but I have no idea what happened to this day. Haven't had anything like it before or since. Still scared to go to the bathroom at night to this day. Got chills just typing this out even now. No idea what happened.
B9, home alone while grandma was on a date. Live with grandma and her parents live on the same street 4 houses down. Be sitting in living room watching the Pokemon movie, throwing Pokemon cards around everywhere because I wanted to feel like a trainer throwing Pokeballs. Hear a tapping on the glass that faces the backyard. Freeze in place, look at window and see a figure standing on the other side. Person breaks glass, nope the fuck out. Run faster than a Bugatti to my great-grandparents. Tell great-grandpa and he calls the police. Police show up and look around. Check for prints. None, and check the house to see if they're hiding. Cop finds something on my pile of thrown Pokemon cards, shows it to great-grandpa. He begins to cry a bit. Grandma comes home not knowing shit, no cell phones. Police tell her everything, show her what was found on Pokemon cards. She breaks down and cries. Police leave and we stay with great-grandparents until the next day when the window gets fixed. Grandma replaces all the locks and buys a gun. Don't understand why they're so scared. 2 years later I bring it up and grandma shows me what scared her. It was a picture from inside my closet. The date on the photo was from 2 days before the break-in, and in the photo I can be seen sleeping in my bed.
Me B, out at a friend's house. Brother texts me along the lines of, "I thought you had taken the back door's key." I get home few hours later, ask WTF he was talking about, says I came home early and called up to his window, claimed I didn't have the key and couldn't get in, kept insisting for a while to open the door. Brother found it creepy. He's the type to turn on every light when he's home alone. Didn't open the door and stopped replying. The thing pretending to be me went away after a while. What kind of spook is this?
Be son of someone who used to have a minor modeling career. She could have become really famous. Got pregnant with me instead. I am 100% white BTW. She is an alcoholic and while still really beautiful can't get a man she is interested in. She sometimes murmurs in her sleep that she hates me. She once sleepwalked around the house with a kitchen knife saying that she wants to kill my dad, whom I've never met, and me.
Man and girl go out to drive under moonlight. They stop it on at a side of road. He turned to his girl and say, "Baby, I love you very much. What is it, honey?" "Our car is broken down. I think the engine is broken. I'll walk and get some more fuel." "Okay. I'll stay here and look after our stereo. There have been news report of stereos being stolen. Good idea. Keep the doors locked no matter what." I love you, sweaty. So the guy left to get full for the car. After 2 hours, the girl say, "Where is my baby? He was supposed to be back by now." Then the girl hear a scratching sound and voice say, "Let me in." The girl doesn't do it, and then after a while she goes to sleep. The next morning she wakes up and finds her boyfriend still not there. She gets out to check, and man door hand hook car door.
So I had a friend in elementary school. Rich as shit, lived out of town in a heavily wooded area. Anytime we were at his house, we stayed in the basement. Basement had 2 rooms and a window. First room was a media room. Giant TV, sound system, computers, gaming equipment, comfy couches, the good shit. Second room was the green room. Toys, music instruments, workout equipment, shit like that. Little window led from hot tub/back deck outside to the green room inside. Anytime I spend the night, we sleep in the media room. We were never told not to sleep in the green room, but we had no reason to. One day, another friend comes over. Well, we only have 2 couches, so one of us will sleep in the green room. His dad immediately shuts that down, rolling out a sleeping bag in front of the TV and making it clear we could not sleep in the green room. Fast forward a few years. Big birthday party. Too many people for the media room. 2 people need to sleep in the green room. Me, since it's my house, and Anon, since my dad likes you best so you'll get in the least trouble. Little nervous, but fuck it, I'm a big little boy. Go to sleep on the floor while a friend is passed out on workout shit. Wake up feeling uneasy. Hear footsteps. Oh fuck, oh man, we're gonna get grounded. Pretend to be asleep. Footsteps draw closer. Open my eyes, just a slit. Long blonde hair. Black dress, or, at least, dark. Hard to tell using only moonlight. Long fingernails. And most notably, standing right over me. Slowly kneels on top of me, like she's riding me cowgirl. Lays down all the way, her head to the right of mine. I'm almost choking on perfume. Oh fuck, am I getting raped? She just lays there, then starts crying. Gently at first, then full on sobbing. She slowly lifts herself. Puts a hand on one side of my neck, then the other. Slowly brings them together. Starts putting pressure. She's slowly choking me while sobbing. I can't pretend to be asleep any longer. Eyes bolt open. Stare into her blue, bloodshot eyes. She takes her hands off my neck and puts a finger to her lip, as if to say, "Bitch." Slowly stands up and walks out. I don't fall back asleep. Next morning, we're in the hot tub. I haven't told anyone. Friend is gloating that his dad didn't catch us. Good thing my mom isn't in town, she works out super early. Excuse me. As we're getting out, he looks at the window. Huh, that's odd. Pulls window open. I thought we locked this last night. Never went back to his house after that.
Growing up as a kid, my dad liked to take me out camping a lot. Oftentimes it would just be the 2 of us jumping into his truck, driving out into some remote area in the forest, not an actual camping ground, pitching a tent, and sitting by a fire. It was a great time for us to bond, away from the chaos of normal life, just the 2 of us hanging out with nothing else to do. Plenty of creepy stuff happened, but looking back at it now I can see that a majority of it was all my overactive imagination of being out in the woods in the middle of nowhere. Like the time we came across an area with a bunch of downed trees, and I concocted some story in my head about a monster that roamed the forest and took them all down. There was one moment though that's always stuck out. Something about it never came off as being right, and I've never been able to fully explain or understand it. We were at a new camping area, some place we'd never been before, and after pitching our tent we decided to go walk off into the woods and wander around. After maybe about an hour in, we broke through the trees and came across a clearing of grass. It was extremely odd in that all around was forest, and here was just this area of grass. In the middle of it sat a small cabin. It looked all raggedy and decrepit, like no one had been there in a very long time.
All around the house besides the grass were old rusted out car parts, big huge pieces too. Which is really odd, because again you were literally surrounded by thick woods within this clearing, and it'd be extremely difficult, not to mention nonsensical, to have all this junk, especially with no visible cars. Off to the side of the house was, I guess, a canyon, not really sure what to call it. Like a gap in between the land, which had a straight drop down, but the gap wasn't that big, maybe a foot or 2. Almost like someone purposely made this little gap here for some inexplicable reason. So, we walked into this area. Before we did so it was pretty quiet with the exception of the occasional birds chirping or something. Yet as soon as we walked onto the grass we both distinctly heard this woman. She was yelling, pissed as all fucking shit, but what she was yelling about I'll never know because it wasn't English. She had a typical Midwestern accent that I remember, but whatever she was yelling was pure gibberish. Accompanied with her yelling sounded like pounding and banging of feet/fist, and also slamming of pots around. What didn't make sense about this is you could clearly see into the cabin with the window that faced us, and yet we couldn't really make out anyone inside, or at least I couldn't. What was even stranger was the smell, or really the lack thereof. See, the woods have a certain scent to them, at least I feel they do. It's refreshing, clean, woody, sometimes strong and pungent, but always a scent. There was nothing when we entered in there, nothing at all. Like almost a vacuum had sucked it all up and it was gone. So, after this woman had started screaming at us, I obviously didn't want to be there anymore. I was more scared that we were on someone's land as opposed to something paranormal or weird going on. I looked up at my dad to tell him we should probably go, and that's when he did something I'd never seen him do before. He picked me up, and just ran straight into the woods. I'd never had my dad pick me up, and I'd never seen him run, ever. Maybe he saw something, maybe he understood something I didn't, I don't know, but whatever it was scared the shit out of him. He ran for maybe a quarter of the way back to camp, set me down, and told me to just walk fast. The entire time we didn't say anything, and the entire time it seemed like he was about to do another dead sprint at any given moment. He kept looking back, expecting something. I don't know what. We got back to camp safely though, packed everything up, and immediately drove off. He's never talked to me about it, and every time I try to bring it up I just get silence. For the longest time I assumed it was just trespassing, but as I get older I find that harder to believe.
I died in a field in the middle of nowhere. Urban exploration was always a passion of mine, but when I moved to East Montana, there wasn't a whole lot of urban to explore. So I turned my interests to exploring the multitude of abandoned farmhouses that dotted the empty fields and rolling, sagebrush-covered hills. I spent my summer evenings driving around dirt roads with my camera in the passenger seat. Found lots of interesting old places. It fascinated me how homes that had seemed so loved at some point in time could pass into stages of decay. Sometimes these houses were on fenceless property that had no other buildings, nothing else for hours. I felt safest on these. Sometimes there would be a down fence and I'd look around and attempt to decide if I'd be able to trespass unnoticed. I reasoned within my own brain that I wasn't vandalizing. I was just there to observe and record the stages of sad decay. I was nearly back to my parked car when I heard the truck coming down the roadway. I rose my camera above my head as I tromped through the dry grass and offered a smile and a wave to the guy. I never even saw his face, and for some reason, I heard the sound of the rifle behind me instead of in front, the direction the blast came from. The bullet didn't hurt. I watched the guy eject the shell, stand there for a moment, then get back into his beat-up truck and take off. I didn't understand why he had done that and why he had just drove away. I tried to move but couldn't. I couldn't move my head, either. Thousands of thoughts in my brain. Panic. If I were paralyzed I wouldn't still be able to stand. But there I was, standing, staring to the expanse of nothingness to the north. The sun set and I was still there. My car was just out my line of sight. I thought about my camera. My windows, which were rolled down. It was intensely dark out there at night and it should have been cold, but I felt nothing. My back should have ached fiercely. The sun came up, and it went down. A vehicle went past on the road, rooster plumes of dust rising in the vivid blue sky. I could hear the crickets. Or at least imagined I could. I realized that I couldn't hear anything, either. Just the most disturbing absence of sound. More days and nights. Frost on the dead blades of grass around me. A full moon. No moon. Full. None. Brightness at night and pitch blackness. On and on. Concepts became more vague. I couldn't remember my boyfriend's face. I couldn't remember my mom's name. The concept of me faded and all I knew was the seasons cycling in and out. Eventually the sky turned red. The earth moved and shifted, I could see it. The grass was gone and replaced by sand. Creatures, huge and unrecognizable to anything that remained in the ruins of my memory, moved in my line of sight and back out. And still, I stand there, intensely conscious but seemingly forgotten.
I write this in, hope that somebody finds it. I woke up this morning, and things were already a little off. My alarm didn't go off and the neighbor's damn dogs weren't barking. That should have been my first hint. Getting up I did the usual, shit, shave, shower, but it was while was making breakfast that I had first began to notice. I had turned on the television, and there was nothing but static. Every channel, static. The cable box didn't even seem to register being connected. While I waited for my computer to turn on, I checked my phone. No signal. Must be a power outage somewhere, that had to be it. No, because my toaster worked and the eye went on. A tower or something might be down instead. But that was when I saw my computer. There was static on the monitor, nothing to display. That wasn't right, my computer couldn't have been broken. After several attempts to get it back to normal, and with no luck, I decided it might be best to go for a walk. Now, I live out in the suburbs. I rent a house with a friend of mine, but he was out of town visiting his family for the holidays. It was pretty much white suburbia where we lived, with soccer moms and emo kids galore. But, it was still, a little unusual this morning. There were no cars driving along the main roads, all of the driveways of the houses were empty. There was no noise, anywhere. No birds chirping or flapping their wings. Insects seemed to be absent, and couldn't even hear the nearby overpass. My time on my phone blinked 9:01 repeatedly in the corner. Funny, that was the same time I woke up. So, I decided to stop at a little grocery store nearby. It was closed, empty of all life, except for the rows of food and drinks on the inside. Not even the adjoining variety stores were open. I hadn't seen another soul since I woke up. It was best I returned home and explored this further. I took my car, driving out of the suburbs. Everywhere it was the same. Empty driveways, no other signs of life. The roads were completely abandoned, but yet I still obeyed the traffic laws. The CBD was vacant, shops and stores all closed. Police and fire authorities also seemed to be missing. Signal to my phone hadn't returned. The town's mall was locked up tight, lights all turned off like no one had even been in there. Down the main street of the city I got out of my car. I called, I shouted, pleading for a response until my throat was raw and dry. All sorts of things had gone through my mind. This had to be a prank, a citywide prank, and I was going to be on IV while they filmed me slowly going into insanity. That was my first thought. Zombies, mass alien abductions, government conspiracies were the next. I even thought of the rapture, and considered the possibility that I was not worthy. By sunset, I came to accept that I was alone. So I write this, in hope that somebody finds it. That they know my story. I'm going to refuel my car stolen from a gas station. Who's going to stop me? I'm going to drive out of this place into the next city. I have to find somebody out there, I can't be alone here. On day 2 L awoke, having pulled up on the side of the road. I made it to the next town over, there's nobody here, either.
I grew up in a large suburb outside of Houston. It was during the early 90s when a lot of farmland settled by the original German immigrants was being bought up and turned into housing and Walmarts. My family lived at the very end of our subdivision, and past my house was a great expanse of farmland, flanked by thick woods, and old decaying wooden homes from the 1800s. Every day on my walk home from school I would pass by a particularly overgrown old shack, which I guess must have at some point been a house, which leaned like it would fall over at any minute on its tired old foundation, and just beyond it was a long row of aging fence. It was my daily commute to and from elementary school, and I'd walk by it, pick up interesting rocks and things, and I never thought much of it. There was usually construction as the subdivision was expanding, so they had dug long trenches for what I suppose was for sewer, and erected electrical lines through the farmland. Beyond the fence was a small lake, which I had often snuck in to explore and catch frogs, but after an encounter with a water moccasin, which is a species of pit viper, I decided to stay clear of it. The farm had cows which would meander through the meadow, and one large black horse I would often see grazing and trotting around. One day at school a storm had rolled in during the previous night, and I remember that the clouds were so thick and black that it felt like nighttime when I had arrived at school. It didn't take long before the storm was in full force, and the power had gone out at school. Our teacher decided to have us all sit together on the floor and read to us for the rest of the day, which was fine by me. The storm had passed, but the darkness lingered when I got out of school. So I walked the now muddy path in the strange darkness past the crooked house, and beside the rotting fence, each step becoming more and more difficult as the mud collected on my shoes. That's when I heard the thrashing. The cows weren't there, but I remember clearly that old black horse. I remember thinking that it was sick, or injured, or something. Its black coat was slick, and steam was rising off its body in the cold air. It was kicking its back legs wildly, and violently slamming its face into the muck. It had a weird look to it, not like it was panicking, but like it was calm, with its mouth shut, and it didn't look to be out of breath. Again it slammed its head into the mud, and kicked out its legs, then shook its head from side to side furiously. I stopped to watch it. Looking back, I wish I had just kept walking. I remember that after a minute or two of this it stopped and looked up at me, the grime slowly sliding off of its face.
It must have been in a matter of a second, because I had no time to react, and the horse had charged towards me. It didn't jump over the fence, but instead lowered its massive head and tore through the gap between the fence boards. The wood cracked and splintered as its muscled body strained and its long neck extended through the gap. The horse savagely lashed out with its giant mouth and started snapping at me. With its entire body covered in huge, swollen muscles, it would recoil, then slam all of its weight back into the fence, attempting to break the boards. Its enormous, broad teeth came inches from me, and I fell out of my shoes backwards, leaving them stuck fast in the mud. It's a miracle that the fence was holding back the creature. I could see it clearly now. The horse was burned, badly. The skin around its mouth had been seared off, and tendrils of pink, bloody skin snaked its way over its face like a spiderweb. The absence of skin made its teeth seem even larger, its black gums exposed, and its mouth frothing with spit that I could feel hitting me in the face. At that moment I was absolutely terrified that this horse would kill me. I remember wanting to get up, but the thick mud had me trapped. I also remember the smell. It was awful. Some abhorrent mixture of wet animal, burned meat, and singed hair. But what has stuck with me the most were its eyes. They weren't white, but cloudy, like someone had poured milk into black ink. As it struggled to reach me through the fence, its nostrils flared, and I could feel the heat of its breath on me, its teeth viciously snapping shut over and over. The clicking noise of the heavy teeth slamming together was deafening. I left my shoes and ran home. I remember my mother screaming at me about the mud when I stormed in. I told her about the horse that had nearly killed me, and that I had left my shoes there in the mud. She grabbed me by the arm and was going to make me take her back there to get them. But I cried and screamed not to go, so she went alone. When she got back, she had my muddy old sneakers in her hands, and she told me that she saw the horse. It was dead. A farmhand was pulling its body with a tractor, and he told my mom that the horse had died earlier that day. One of the power lines that had been installed running through the meadow was knocked over during the storm, and the horse must have been drinking from the lake, because it had been electrocuted and killed. He said that it had died instantly by that lake hours ago. My mom didn't believe me, and still doesn't. No one does.
A game of flashlight tag. When I was 10, I played a late-night game of flashlight tag with a bunch of neighborhood kids. If you don't know what flashlight tag is, it's the same as tag, but you play it in the dark. The person who's it gets a flashlight, and they have to yell the name of the person they see with it in order to tag them. It was really cloudy that night, and most people had their curtains drawn, so it was the perfect level of darkness for hiding in the side of the street my house was on was skirted by a broad length of woods. That was basically the boundary for our side of the game. You could run through any yard, even go across the street and run through their yards, but you weren't allowed to hide in the woods, because it was too difficult to find anyone in there, and it was very easy to trip over tree limbs or end up with poison oak. Of course, this rule was frequently and flagrantly ignored when people got too close to being caught. They'd duck off into the bushes for a few seconds, or run behind a group of trees to evade capture. I don't remember who was it at the time, but I was hiding in a backyard 2 houses down from my house. The family that lived there had a little playhouse for their daughter, a swing set and a doghouse, but no dog. I would periodically duck into the doghouse whenever I saw the flashlight's searching beam approaching. Those of us trying to hide from the it person liked to spook each other in the dark by jumping out of nowhere and making each other scream, giving away our positions. I thought I knew where the it guy was, but I got comfortable hanging out on the swing set. Suddenly, a person with a flashlight came around the corner of the house and angled it almost directly at me. I jumped and ran for the edge of the woods. When I got there, I hovered in case they saw me and were going to yell at me for cheating. The beam of light seemed to explore the swing set where I was, then came in my direction. But there was no sense of hurry at all to it, and I wondered for a second if maybe road attracted the attention of the homeowner. Most people on the block knew we were out playing flashlight tag, but you never can be sure that someone won't get nervous if you stay in their yard too long. So I crouched down in the grass and waited to see who it was. They shined the light right in my face and I tried to cover it with my hand to avoid identification. The creepy thing was, they never said anything, just shined that light on me. "You got Mel," exclaimed, hoping that if it was a homeowner, they'd realize I thought they were the flashlight tagger. Then I realized that 2 houses down, people were yelling and there was the it guy's flashlight beam chasing them around. I stood up and tried to see who was shining the light on me. They just stood there, not moving, not saying anything. I felt a little freaked out. If you don't want us playing in your yard, I'll go tell them it's off limits, okay? The person started walking toward me. I didn't feel right, so I started walking toward the edge of the yard. The person just kept shining the light on me and coming toward me. So I ran. When I looked back, the person with the flashlight was running too, and they were an adult, much bigger and much faster than me. I felt scared now, not sure why this person was chasing me. I was running toward where the other kids had been, but they were gone now. It just seemed to be me and the person with the flashlight. So I turned right and ducked into the woods. I dropped to the ground, shaking bushes and stuff to try to confuse the person, then shimmied under a ring of thick bushes and curled up. I could see the flashlight in the woods with me, looking around. I could hear the person's footsteps breaking sticks and crunching on pine needles. I didn't know what the fuck was going on, and I just wanted to get back to all the other kids. Eventually, the flashlight wandered deeper into the woods and I crawled quiet as a mouse back to the edge of the trees and then got up and ran toward the street. I was immediately caught by the person who was it, but I didn't care. He yelled loud that I was now it, and I tried to tell him that there was someone else with a flashlight wandering around in the woods, but he took off into the dark yelling about no tagbacks. Don't go in the woods. I yelled, but nobody responded. Of course, any who heard me would just assume I was talking about not cheating at the game, but I was sincerely worried about that person wandering around in them. Of course, now I had a flashlight of my own, so I thought, I should go and see if I can find out who that was just to make myself feel better. I went back behind the house I'd come from and a bunch of laughing shadows scampered out of sight into neighboring yards. I ignored them and headed straight for the trees. I couldn't see any other light in there, so I thought, maybe he went home. I didn't know if it was a man or a woman, but I didn't imagine any women trudging through the woods at night. So I went about playing the game again, albeit anxious because of the lingering thought that there was someone wandering in the woods who didn't seem to be playing the game with us. I ran across the street and chased people through the backyards there, but after a while I found the lots empty and realized that they must have gone back across the street. I ran back over and was exploring the beach's backyard. Mrs. Beach had a clothesline with a bunch of drying sheets on it, and her daughter Charlotte liked to hide among the linens and stay close to home in case she got too scared of the dark. She was only a year younger than me. I thought I heard something at the tree line, so I went over and was waving the flashlight around into the woods. Stay out of the woods, I remember yelling. I waved the flashlight back and forth a couple more passes, then saw someone off in the distance. I held the light on whoever it was. They were about half a job into the woods, hard to make out, but it looked to me like Charlotte. Charlotte had brown hair that her mother insisted on keeping shoulder length. We always dressed dark for flashlight tag, and Charlotte liked to wear this deep purple sweatshirt, so it was usually easy to tell when you had found her. Charlotte, I see you, I yelled. She just stood there. I continued to hold the light on her and call her name, but she didn't seem to move. She stood there partially obscured by a tree and looked at me. The distance between us was enough that I couldn't see if she was blinking or not, but she had her head propped at an angle like she was looking around the trunk at me with her mouth hanging slightly open. Every now and then she sorta twitched or squirmed. It was a real freaky kinda movement. Charlotte, come out of there, I yelled. Everybody. Charlotte's it, but she won't come out of the woods. Some kids including my friend Dustin Appy paired behind me and started joining in my yell for Charlotte to come out. Do you see her? I asked. Yeah, she's over behind that tree. Charlotte, get over here. Dustin said. But she wouldn't come. Charlotte, are you okay? Get over here, dummy. Charlotte seemed to stand up straighter and then disappear behind the tree. We could hear movement, but it seemed to be going away rather than toward us. Dustin started shouting Charlotte's name again and trudging into the woods after her, but I grabbed him and gave him the flashlight to take with him. I was scared again, because this all seemed surreal. I went to Charlotte's house and knocked until her father answered, Mr. Beach. Charlotte won't come out of the woods, and I'm worried about her, I told him. I wasn't sure if he'd take me seriously, but he rolled up his newspaper and disappeared into the closet behind the door for a moment before returning with a huge flashlight strapped to a car battery. Show me where she is, he told me, so I lead him to the woods and pointed to where I'd seen her. She was right there, I said, by a tree, but she wouldn't come out and she was acting like she was sick or something. A bunch of the other kids kept calling Charlotte, Charlotte, and I could see Dustin's flashlight beam moving around through the trees. Mr. Beach went in after him. They explored the woods for a good 15 to 20 minutes, and Mr. Beach started getting real angry. We could hear him yelling very loudly for Charlotte, threatening her with all sorts of punishments if she didn't get her ass back in the backyard that instant. The game was over by now, and we kids just stood there in the Beach's backyard among the linens and watched. Dustin came running back out of the bushes with a dead flashlight eventually. Mr. Beach came back out of the woods. "Game over, kids," he said, "get inside. Ask your folks if they can help me and to bring flashlights." We all ran back home. My dad went out with 3 different flashlights. My mother went and turned on all the lights in the back rooms and opened the curtains and shades to help illuminate the backyard. I sat on the couch all upset, and she eventually came back and hugged me and sat with me while I told her about the person with the flashlight chasing me and how I thought maybe Charlotte had run into him. Mr. Beach had gone inside and called them to report a missing child. They brought huge lights and did a march through the woods checking very thoroughly, but didn't find her. My mother told my dad what I'd told her, he told an officer, and I ended up giving a statement. They went to the house 3 doors down and knocked. But the folks that lived there had been asleep and didn't know who would have been in their backyard. The police asked all up and down the neighborhood, but nobody claimed to know anything. The other end of the woods came to a back road mainly used by logging trucks. They found Charlotte 2 days later, on the other side of the logging road, down an embankment that ended at a stream, stuffed into a drain pipe. Her neck had been broken and she was apparently stabbed multiple times afterward. My parents wouldn't tell me about it, they thought it would upset me. But Dustin told me all the details at school the next day. It was the most awful thing our town had ever had happen. The police blocked off the logging road and spent months tracking down loggers and truckers who frequently used it. There was a curfew for months and we were told not to play flashlight tag anymore. We didn't argue. What leaves me shaking to this day is the memory of Charlotte's face, hanging out from behind the tree, looking at me. Sometimes I wonder if at that moment, I had been witnessing her death. And I wonder if that had almost been me.
When I was about 9 to 10 years old, I had a dream that really fucked with me because it felt 100% real. I dreamt I was on a wooden raft in the middle of the ocean. There was a huge storm with massive waves throwing me around. I tried to hold on, but my grip was extremely weak for no reason. I eventually got thrown off. I was too weak to swim. I sank down into the darkness and I swear I couldn't fucking breathe. The drowning felt real and the water felt real. Then a massive prehistoric sea monster came at me and I woke up. Almost fucking shit myself.
The ball. After having served several months overseas, a soldier begins his long journey home to return to his loving wife and their toddler son. The boy had grown so much since his father's tour of duty, and was now walking and talking and very typically spry for a boy of his age. The father couldn't wait to finally see his son after all this time, and stopped briefly to purchase a toy ball as a gift for him, and spent the entire ride home thinking of how wonderful it would be to finally have a chance to play with him in the spacious yard of an El rural ranch home. Joy that cannot be expressed in mere words filled the former soldier as he played with his son on those warm summer days, hours at a time until the sun began to melt behind the horizon. Their favorite game was passing the toy ball back and forth, and this simple game was such a strong, loving bond between father and son. One evening, as the twilight air began to cool, a wind stirred up that was as strong as it was curiously bitter with chill. Distracted for a moment by a conversation with his wife, the father didn't notice the increasingly strong wind and how it took hold of the ball and rolled it down the long hill that led into the woods behind the ranch. Giggling with anticipation, his son chased after the ball, not hesitating for once as it rolled intently into the ridge of trees that marked the beginning of untamed woodland. By the time the father noticed that his son had wandered off, the boy was no longer visible behind the wall of trees. After months of searching, no body was ever recovered. The only thing found was the toy ball, which the father kept to remind him of the last lucid moments he shared with his beloved son. Within a year of grieving, the ex-soldier and his wife finally moved into an apartment closer to the city, leaving the ranch and the terrible memories of loss in the past. One uncomfortably not evening, the man sat at his desk, slowly and carefully completing several job applications while his wife slaved her second shift job at the local volunteer community shelter. The pages rustled every so often with the warm, damp breeze from the open window, which provided little relief to the awful heat. The man wiped his brow and continued with the humiliating tediousness. He is suddenly distracted by a soft thud. Looking around the dark room, he finally realizes something out of place. The toy ball, which had been sitting complacently atop a bookshelf for years, had been nudged out of place by the wind. The man stared at the ball, emotionally numb at first and then washed with a deep and sobering grief. He sat and stared, mesmerized for several moments, before slowly lumbering out of his chair to retrieve it. God forbid his wife see this sad sentiment, but as he approached the ball, the wind at that very moment picked up and pushed the ball away from him towards the door. Not thinking any, and wedged it firmly back into its place on top of the bookshelf, and slumped his way to bed, giving up on finishing the stack of applications that would be waiting for him the next morning. Several days passed, and the unrelenting humid weather persisted, and the window stayed parted to let what little relief could be had from an occasional breeze. Around the same hour as before, while reviewing several letters of decline, the man heard a familiar soft thud from behind him. Again, he turns to find the toy ball sitting complacently in the middle of the room. And once again, he sat and stared at it somewhat obliviously. But then, just as the impulse fired in his thoughts to get up and retrieve the ball, the wind stirs and pushes it away from him toward the door. This moment played out all too familiar for him, and he suddenly froze in curiosity. He took a step toward the ball, and on cue, the wind picks up and creeps the ball an equal distance away toward the door. Another step, and again. The wind pushes the toy ball. This continues step by step until the ball is in the upstairs hallway with the man just a few paces behind it. But then it occurs to him, there is no way that the wind could carry into the hallway. Upon that realization, the ball slowly rolled toward him and stopped at his feet. He was equally as curious as he was unnerved. Almost reflexively, he nudges the ball with his foot, and it tumbles down the hallway until it crawls to a stop. Again, he pauses for a moment, unable to process what is happening. And again, just as he has a notion to discount these surreal events as his overactive anxiety, the ball, completely on its own recognizance, begins to roll back toward him, this time with enough momentum to audibly bump against these toes. But instead of fear, something deep in his heart accepts this moment as an opportunity, and he nudges the ball again, somehow knowing that it would return to him on cue. And this intimately paranormal game continued for at least another few minutes. Soon the man picked up the ball, satisfied that the ball was moving on its own intent. Warm tears streamed uncontrollably from his eyes as he returned to his room and replaced the ball in its place on top of the bookshelf. He never told his wife of the incident, and fell asleep next to her, overwhelmed by what had just occurred to the point of exhaustion. Alone the next evening, as he sorted through the inevitably cowardly dismissals of his employment applications, he came upon a small, curiously distressed envelope with only his name printed by hand on the back. Tilting his head, he opened the letter to find a note written in blood on a torn piece of cloth from a child's shirt. The note read, "Thanks for showing me how you play the ball game with your son. It might make what he's going through easier on him."
Ah shit, I love telling this story. Working in far northern Alberta, area where it's literally a huge ass forest and only signs of civilization is oil, gas wells and plants. It's all muskeg in the forest area. Muskeg is scary just by itself. Sits literally soft ground from decaying stuff in the forest that has grass growing on top. It can be immensely deep water, rotting plants and animals, but thick enough for grass to grow and some small trees to even take root. It's Alberta's quicksand. Moose are known to venture into it and get stuck and drown. In areas like this, some of the wells can only be visited by most vehicles in winter. Some are even more remote and can only be accessed by helicopter even in winter. I picked up a pretty sweet job on one of the helicopter runs doing maintenance for 2 years. I want to stress these locations are at least 300–400 kilometers away from any real civilization at this point, and traveling in these areas is dangerous not only because of animals but shit like muskeg. One summer my pilot lands us down. As we land, a guy exits the little shack set up on site. He looks pretty normal, little tattered and rough, but looks like a normal human, fairly straight cut, short black hair, bit of a 5 o'clock shadow. Iron Maiden t-shirt that is way too large, regular blue jeans. He's going towards the tree line. Yell out to him something like, "Hey, what are you doing here? We can help you get home." He keeps going. Yell out again, "What the fuck, man? How did you get out here? We can help you." Pilot even yells out something like, "We can cancel our run and get you to safety." He makes it to the tree line while we are yelling. He stops, looks back his face kind of slips into a smile. He then runs into the trees and disappeared. No one at work believed us. Still stuck with me. Not really paranormal, but truly the weirdest thing I have ever experienced. I just want to know what he was doing out there. Everything in the shack was normal.
I got one. It happened this year, just before Christmas. Want a real Christmas tree? My parents always kept a fake tree, so I never had one. First Christmas on my own. Decide to go cut my own. Not sure how that works. Google nearest woods. Buy an axe especially for this job. Go at night. Because I'm not entirely sure this is legal, go to wooded area at night. It's snowing heavily, also dark. Very, very dark. I go into the woods with my axe, start looking for the best tree. In light of what happened next, I probably should have just bought a fake tree. Once I am out of sight of my truck, I start hearing noises. I tell myself it's wildlife and then push through. Spoiler. It wasn't wildlife. It was something far, far worse. I start seeing tracks in the snow. Not mine. They were spaced like a person's, but they were too small to be mine. I should have turned around at this point. Instead, I decided it was a deer. You know, the kind that walk on two legs. My mother must have smoked when she was pregnant with me or something. I know, a little scared at this point, so I decide that the best tree is conveniently close. Truth be told, it was a mediocre tree, not worth the stress. As I get ready to cut it down, I hear a noise, nothing loud, but hard to describe, like something getting agitated, but like, also that thing is not something you want to agitate. I hear something fall close by. The snow on a nearby tree was brushed off. The entire time I'd been in the woods, there was an ambient noise, birds and squirrels and shit, probably. There was now nothing anybody care for the rest of this, or am I wasting my breath?
Okay, somehow, I decided to cut the tree down anyway. You know, like an idiot, the first strike I could have sworn I'd heard a scream in the distance, not just a scream, but something worse. Blood-curdling. I stopped and listened, still just complete, dead, silence. I thought hard about running out of the woods right then. But I thought that would be silly and I was being childish. I took another whack at the tree and heard nothing, so I chalked it up to my imagination and took the tree down the rest of the way. I grabbed the trunk like you see in movies. It wasn't a big tree, I should mention. It wasn't heavy or anything, so dragging it wasn't exactly a feat of Herculean strength. I start dragging it toward my truck. Suddenly, I hear something. It was small, but it was something. I start to observe my surroundings. Problem was it was dark, and I had a goddamned flashlight from the kind of store that sells axes and groceries. Some of the trees behind me had some snow brushed off them, but that wasn't altogether weird. But then I noticed some tracks, the same deer tracks from earlier. MFW, I realized it wasn't a goddamn deer. MFW, I realized the goddamn not deer was following me. Tracking me.
At this point, I knew enough to drop that fucking tree and sprint for the truck. Whatever it was, know enough to know I was aware of its presence, and it dropped all pretense of this being a stealth mission. I could hear it, it was running. I could hear the impact on the snow, and I could hear it wheezing. It was desperate. It was giving everything it had to catch me. I let out a scream. Maybe a forest ranger would find me and help. Nope, then I felt it. It was grabbing at me. Not with teeth, but with hands. Turned and caught a glimpse of orange fur on my coat. Luckily I hadn't buttoned the coat, so I just shook it off like Taylor Swift on meth. I heard a thud. The thing had fallen over with my coat. Then I saw the truck, with the extra adrenaline. I started running faster. Finally, my kidneys were pulling their weight. Long story behind that joke. I was almost there, but then I tumbled to the ground. It had somehow thrown itself at me. Knocked it off me, because no creature can tumble to the ground with its prey and be perfectly ready for a fight. I stumbled away from it. As it stood, it was horrible, covered in this unnaturally bright orange fur. It looked like some sort of beaver, but with it walked on its hind legs. I screamed like a little girl, the littlest girl. Then it talked. I couldn't goddamn believe it. The fucking abomination was talking. I stopped screaming to listen to it. I will never forget what it said. Ned, 1 a.m. the Lorax. I speak for the trees. I speak for the trees have no tongues. It then lectured me for half an hour about over-harvesting trees, and why I shouldn't poach trees from the woods. I have never been more horrified in my life.
Okay, this will be a little longer, so stay with me for a while. Be school kid me, about 20 years ago, so no mobile internet or phone, just stupid kids from 500 people village in a big ass forest, spend time after school either playing SNES or exploring the woods. Found a little lake about 3 kilometers from home. It got a little dam about 7 meters height. Play here with fans for years, mostly hang out with 3 guys. Jan, typical German blonde kid, kind of nerdy. Likes to play Age of Empires and Flight Simulator, while I am hardcore Nintendo kiddie, so while we get along we don't really have a lot in common. Florian, the stupid fat and gay, but we didn't know at that time yet, guy that collected stones. Really weird guy. Remember, this is the 90s, so you had to hang out with local kids, even if they sucked. Third guy, Indian named AJ. Kind of clever and strong but a real douche. THR kind you lent a game and it disappears forever, so we found the lake in spring and played the whole year there. Basically bringing Game Boys, a radio and built shitty tree house etc. Autumn comes and nights get longer, forgot time one day and be at the lake whole day again. When you go there you stay the whole day because it's between two steep mountains without real streets, only animal paths. Forest is really beautiful. Red leaves, nice cold clean air. Trees cast long shadows. Enjoy my time there. We pack our stuff and start to go home. Suddenly we hear some strange whale-like noises and nearly shit our pants. We bolt home and the fat kids gets asthma attack. Carry that fucker the rest of the way with two guys. Get home in panic and tell my parents. They don't believe shit and laugh at us. Not happened again and forgot about it. Fast word, winter came. Lots of snow everywhere. Haven't been to the lake. Caius BTW. Since then because scared as fuck. Guys come over and tell me the lake is frozen. Let's play ice hockey with sticks and stones because poor AF. Winot.jpg sounds fun. Head to lake.
On way to lake we find an old flyer on a tree. Have you seen this kid? AJ tells us wow, didn't they find him yet? Rest us don't know what he is talking about. Comes out a few days after we heard that scary shit a kid went missing. Our parents decided not to tell us about, but the guy was from AJ's school so he heard about it then. Apparently this kid is still missing. Spooked but continue to the lake. Very nice view, beautiful white snow and thick ice on the lake, but it's higher than usual and the water has flown over the dam and froze there so it dangerous to cross it now. We wanted to go to our fave place how we have to cross a, walk slow and be nervous as fuck, 8 meters down to the right, cross the waterfall, completely frozen in the ice, build a tunnel-like structure so I now look down an 8-meter deep ice tunnel. Think wow cool AF, cross dam with no problems and arrive on our shitty bush house, drop our shit and go look for sticks to play hockey, find a good stick and go on the ice to see if it hold on me, it does, cool. Notice though that it gets thinner upstream, decide to not go there, guys yell hey anon, let's use the ice tunnel as goal, good idea, start playing, so the ice tunnel behind the dam is the goal, when you hit the tunnel it makes a kind of strange sound when it hits the bottom, keep playing. All of the sudden the fat kid gets in a rage but starts to play really aggressive, apparently Jan mocked him because he fat again. Florian tackles Jan and he falls down and slides over the ice, right in the direction of the thin ice. Of course suddenly ice cracks and Jan goes down into the water. Anybody lurking? Shall I continue?
He screams and goes down head underwater. I run to him, lie down and crawl to the hole. Grab Jim by his jacket and pull him up. Heavy because his winter jacket soaked full with water pulled him down. Couldn't get up by himself. Heavy breathing and a look of pure terror in his eyes. We pull him out with combined effort and drag him on land. Once catched his breath he told us he had to go home, stop speaking with us. He seems traumatized. Figure it's because of his break-in and bring that guy home. Next day, Mom wakes me up for school and asks me with a worried face if I had been to the lake last day. Tell her the story. She gets pale and tells me there is police with a helicopter neath the lake, makes me promise not to go there anymore. Okay.jpg, go out for school but decide fuck it I have to see what happened there. Thinking of the spooky shit in autumn and get worried. On my way there meet Ajay who is heading to the lake too.
He tells me he knows what happened, seems frightened. Turns out Florian the fat kid saw a body staring at him frozen under the water in the hole the water flows through. It was the body that we hit with the stones. His legs went through the hole but his hips didn't fit. Think a monster drowns him and for a few days I'm convinced there is a monster here. We decide to look for it because W stupid AF. By now the lake is closed with police tape says entry forbidden. Be kids and don't give a fuck. Snow everywhere has been stepped on and searched by police. Don't want to cut tape barriers so decide to climb on a small tree to jump over it. Spooked 100% by now. Get up that tree. WTF find frozen tape recorder. Cool.jpg. Take it in my backpack and keep exploring and look for a monster but don't find anything. Go home. Still spooked. Get yelled on by mom what I've been doing blah blah, get sent to my room. Remember the radio. It has a tape deck. Open it and find a tape. Put it in my player. Play it. Hear whale noises. The end. That fucker from AJ's school spooked the shit out of us with a tape player playing whale noises on a tree. He literally died laughing because he fell from the tree into the lake and got stuck in the stream and drowned. Nobody found him until winter. True story. Or maybe GE recorded the monster and got killed by it during recording? You decide. Also sorry for THR mistakes, I'm a phone poster fag.
Few years ago, in 2008, a native friend and I went up to the Northwest Territories on a hunting trip. A little background, I live in Alberta and I'm in the Canadian Army, 3rd Canadian Division, so I'm a good tracker. My friend, who we will call Panaauau, which is his surname, is Algonquian, also a good tracker. He also lives in Alberta, but was born on a reservation. His family had taught him all the legends and customs when he was growing up, but he handles modern society well. Anyway, we drove for a long time. I wasn't keeping track, but it was more than just a few days. We were headed to a heavily forested region west of the Great Slave Lake. PIC related, I believe that's the general area that this happened. There were no government roads back there, so the drive was rough. The snow was also shit, but we were both used to it and loved cold weather anyway. When we had found a good spot to park, we got our things out of the bed of my truck, and began our trudging through the snow to find a place to set up camp. We wanted to camp in a place a few kilometers from where we parked, to give us a bit of a challenge. Even though it was very heavy snow, the place was beautiful. The nature was completely untouched. I tried snapping a few shots with my phone, but none of the pictures came out good. It was disappointing, but at least the drive was worth it. After walking for about 3 hours, we came into a clearing in the trees, and made the decision that it was where we would set up camp.
I began setting up our 2-person tent, and Panaauau was clearing the snow off of the ground to prepare a fire pit. I had set up the tent and our sleeping bags, and helped Panaauau with the fire pit. Once that was done, I told him to follow me to find some firewood. He nodded, understanding that it was going to be dark soon and we would need a fire. We both had hatchets with us, and began chopping branches off some of the pines close to camp. The wood was wet, so it was going to be difficult to get it dry for the campfire. We had a good stack of thick branches and carried them back. When we returned, there were tracks in the snow that weren't ours. They seemed to be a kind of morphed human footprint. Panaauau and I exchanged strange looks, and set our wood piles in the area that was cleared for a fire. "You think someone else is camping nearby?" I asked. Panaauau shrugged, and replied, "I can't say for sure. Normal person wouldn't walk in the snow barefoot." We returned to our tent and took our rifles out of their carrier cases, now alert. "We should get the fire going now, we've probably got an hour left of sunlight," I said. I headed to the pit, set up some of the wood, covered it with some dry hay that I had brought for fire starting, and got to work on the flint. The fire died out early, so we tossed our beers in a plastic bag and headed into the tent. I got in my sleeping bag and fell asleep quick. I was awoken late at night by the sound of snow crunching. I got out of my sleeping bag as silently as I could, but the movement seemed to alert whatever was outside, and the snow crunching stopped. I shook Panaauau until he woke up. He knew I wouldn't have woken him up unless it was something serious. I pointed to the tent door, and grabbed my rifle. Panaauau grabbed his as well. Practically tore the zipper down and snapped my rifle up as fast as I could, stepping out of the tent slowly. Panaauau held a flashlight in one hand and his rifle in the other, pointing the light in all directions. Nothing, except more footprints like we had found earlier. Something was definitely following us. "I'll get a fire going, don't you let go of that rifle," I told. Panaauau nodded and held his rifle with both hands. I got a fire going as fast as I could, and pulled my rifle from around my arm and sat close to the fire. We sat there until sunrise, feeling watched the entire time. I was sweating even though it was probably 5 degrees out. When it was light enough, we made a quick breakfast, and decided we would track whatever was following us. For the next 4 hours, we were following a very faint trail. We couldn't be sure what we were following was what made the tracks at camp, or just wildlife. Regardless, we were led to a carcass forced onto a branch of a tree. Basically, it was as if someone had torn a caribou in half and forced the second half onto a branch. It smelled awful, and was partially frozen. It seemed like it had been there for at least a day or two. We continued following the trail, but the smell of death and decay never left. Somewhere along the walk, we had heard a very distant, but also very distinct shriek of some sort. Like the sound a pig makes when it's being butchered while still alive. The hairs on the back of my neck stood straight up. "We should turn and leave," Panaauau stated. "Why? Bad spirits walk among us." I gave him a kind of "what the fuck are you talking about" look, and replied, "Are you sure? I'd like to know what the hell is out here. Your curiosity is going to get us killed." I sighed and nodded, letting Panaauau take point on the walk back. I didn't recognize anything on the way back. Not even the dead caribou on the tree. "Are we lost?" I asked. Panuau stopped and turned to me, and said, "I don't know." The trail vanished only minutes after we turned back. I was pissed. "Why the fuck didn't you say anything? I didn't want to alarm you. I figured if we walked in the same direction we came, we would get to the camp. Even our own tracks are gone. We need to stop now and figure out where in the hell we are." I took my backpack off and opened it up, searching for my map and compass. While I was busy in my backpack, I saw Panuau scramble for his rifle from the corner of my eye. He brought it up and fired off 3 rounds. I looked at him and said, "What happened?" I also brought up my rifle, but noticing Panuau's face was white as the snow on the ground. "Wendigo," he said. "What?" Panuau didn't reply. He simply began backing up, and beckoned to me. I closed my backpack, put it on, and we both jogged through the trees. We had now been out there for close to 7 hours, and the sun was going to set soon. I took duct tape from my bag and secured a flashlight on the end of my rifle, handing the tape to Panuau for him to do the same. We were no longer jogging, but picking up the pace indeed. We wouldn't be able to track anything in the dark. We were feeling watched all the time and kept hearing branches snapping only meters away. Somehow, though, we found our camp. By this time, it was already dark. We packed up our things as quickly as we could, and left the non-essentials behind. Our tent had been torn open as well as our bags. It was very obvious that something was here. Right as we were about to depart, I shined my flashlight at the tree line that we had just came out of. What I saw made my animalistic instincts kick into hyperdrive. It looked so skinny that its bones were almost pushing out of its skin. The eyes appeared so sunken, almost black, and the bony fingers were jagged like twigs. It was just standing there, watching us, a viscous black fluid dripping from its mouth. I gasped for air and fired a round. Cocked the rifle, fired again. And again. My hands were shaking bad. Panuau now had also began firing. Once the smoke had settled, the thing was gone. We were now sprinting to find my truck. I wish we hadn't parked so far away. We had no idea what our surroundings were, only what direction we were going. Everything was dark except for the straying beams of our flashlights. I was so exhausted, and I was now running entirely off of adrenaline. We heard the screams again, but this time it didn't stop and were much closer to us. I turned while running. Where the fuck was Panuau? I stopped running, knowing the danger, but I was not going to leave my friend behind. I shouted his name multiple times, only hearing the ghastly, inhuman screeches in return. I shined my flashlight at the trees, desperately looking for any sign of him. He was gone. Then I saw movement. A lot of movement. This was no longer just one thing hunting me, this was many things hunting me. I didn't want to leave Panuau behind, but my brain screamed at me to fucking run. Whatever they were now only 1 to 3 meters from me, and my body just kind of turned and began sprinting on its own. At least that's what it felt like. I now knew what it was like to be the gazelle being chased by the lion. I felt nothing but fear. I have no idea how long I was running, but at one point I broke out of the trees and into the road. I was ecstatic, and continued sprinting down the road until I spotted my truck. I tore my keys from the lanyard on my backpack, and as soon as I got to the door, I shoved the keys in, and threw myself onto the seat. I locked the door hoping it might do some good, and started the engine. The headlights went on, and there he was. Standing in front of the car was Panuau. I screamed, "Get in the car!" Instead of running to the passenger door, he twitched and seemed to float towards the driver's door. My instincts once again kicked in and I slammed the pedal. I was practically flying down the iciest roads you could imagine. I have no idea how I didn't wreck and die. I didn't slow down until I was back on the government road. I was almost crying the entire time. When I got to the nearest town, I told the police what happened. I left out the Wendigo part, fearing they would dismiss my story as a joke. I told them my friend's name, where we had camped. I left them my phone number, and started my drive back to Alberta. I couldn't wait to get back home. They still haven't found him.
OC, my 18th birthday party, October, live out in the country in Tennessee, dark as all kinds of fuck, perfect chilly weather, around 25 people all gathered at my house, we're playing manhunt. One guy runs off into woods, everyone else waits an hour then hunts him with paintball guns, plan on multiple rounds through the night, couple rounds go by, no big deal, my 10-year-old brother draws short straw, almost didn't let him go hide but he begged, what could happen? We tried to find him for -6 hours, Eventually find him terrified in a hunter-perched thing in a tree. Friend who found him said he kicked him in the face and almost knocked him off the tree at first. I ask him why. He tells me that he heard me trying to find him below the perch hours earlier. He peeks out. It isn't fucking me. It isn't a fucking person. It stayed below the tree calling his name for a few hours. Ran off when it heard us coming to actually find him. WTF guys. Going in the woods at night without at least 24 grown men with weapons.
It was a few weeks ago that the hay bales started creeping slowly away from the house. Every morning when I woke up, each had moved a few hundred feet from where it was before. I assumed it was pranksters with nothing better to do, and so I ignored it. Within a few days, though, the bales began to approach the boundaries of the farm. I was tired of the whole game by then, and decided to move them back. It took a tedious hour to bring them all from where they were to over near the house again, and by the time I was done I was ready to snap the neck of whatever little pissant was deciding to screw with me. The next morning, I found each and every one of my horses messily decapitated. The smell was what woke me up. Each one was slumped over against the side of its stall. There were no signs of the heads. I spent the rest of the day cleaning up the mess and burying the remains. It was only when I was done that I noticed the bales of hay had all returned to their positions from the day before, scattered far out into the fields. This time I left them where they were. That night I sat on my porch with my shotgun in hand and a pot of coffee on the table beside me. I sat for hours, straining my eyes into the fields to catch a glimpse of who was moving my hay bales. Finally, I was beginning to nod off. I would have, but just as my eyes began to close I heard a clamor and a rustling of trees from the nearby woods. I leaned forward, my heart racing with excitement. I was going to catch the bastard. I fumbled with my gun and fidgeted in my seat, waiting anxiously for whoever it was to get close enough to ambush. It was only when the thing got close enough for me to make out its silhouette in the dark that I was frozen still. The thing that crept into my fields from the nearby woods didn't seem to notice me sitting there. It stalked, hunched and deliberate, through the field with the posture of a tiptoeing thief. If not for the fact that it must have towered to over 10 feet tall even in its crouched position, it might have seemed almost frail. The thinness of its arms and legs and the emaciated, caved-in quality of its chest reminded me of a starving animal. Still, this thing was undeniably strong, and I watched it hoist each bale up into its arms with ease, and set it down carefully a while away, taking only a few strides to cover the distance. I watched it work, moving each bale thoughtfully. Every once in a while it would straighten up to look around at the other bales' positions in the field, before adjusting the one it was working on ever so slightly. Before it left, it looked towards the house. I felt its eyes sweep over me in the dark, but whether it saw me or not I couldn't tell. Then, it turned silently and crept back the way it came, disappearing into the dark of the woods. It took me an hour before I had the courage to move at all. I went inside after a while, but didn't sleep that night. It was only when the sun rose that I dared step off my porch into the fields. The hay bales were where it left them. Strangely, it didn't move them as far as it had in the previous days. They were approaching something invisible in the fields, and as I looked at them I realized that they seemed to be marking some line. Indeed, as I walked around the house, I saw the distinct circle that they formed with me at the center. At first I thought the bales were just being haphazardly moved away from the house, but now I could see that they were instead being moved towards some boundary. The thing was sending me a message. I slept uneasily that night, and only because I was exhausted. The next morning the bales hadn't moved at all. They didn't move at all for the rest of that week, in fact. They were finally where the thing wanted them. I made myself sick trying to interpret them. Why would this thing expend so much energy moving my hay bales, and threaten me with such violence should I try to interfere? Killing my horses was just that, a threat. An intelligent threat, at that. It knew what would scare me, and it knew that I would understand the implications. The sound of an automobile working its way along the road to my farm one morning gave me a little rush of excitement. I'd been planning to abandon the farm since I saw the thing, but I couldn't hope to leave on foot without risking it treating me like it treated my horses. But, if I could get in the car with whoever was coming my way, I might be able to escape before it could stop me. I didn't know or care who it was. I decided that the moment they stopped the car, I would jump in the passenger's seat and tell them to get the hell out of here. I didn't get the chance. The car worked its way slowly along the road, trundling across the uneven ground. I urged it silently to hurry. It was when it passed between the two bales placed on either side of the road that I began to hear a booming clatter from the woods. The thing burst suddenly from between the trees, sprinting on all four of its terrible, gangly limbs towards the car. Within a few seconds it was there, pouncing on the automobile like a predatory cat. Within moments it was picking and peeling the vehicle's steel frame apart, working to get at the driver. The man, whoever he was, screamed all the while, and I could hear him even over the crunching of metal and the shattering of glass. It was only when the thing crushed him carelessly in its hand that the screaming stopped. It tossed him away, and straightened up to look at me once again. In the sunlight, I could see the inhumanity of it. It was composed entirely of something awful and alive which was lashed together in a messy semblance of a human form. Whatever it was made of looked so polished and hard, that if it weren't for the minute writhing of the stuff, I'd think it was made of granite. The thing retreated back into the woods, and I was left to my shock. My eyes wandered to where the car sat, the engine still sputtering, between two of the hay bales. Suddenly, I understood. The message was clear: I am this thing's captive, and I am not allowed visitors. Nothing may cross the borders it has set. I'm trapped here, by the thing that stalks the fields, and it demands nothing except that I never leave. Still, I don't know if I can handle being that thing's canary. I've been thinking hard for the last few days since I saw it crush that man's chest, and silence him before he could finish his scream. If I crossed the hay bale border, it'd probably do the same. It'd smash my skull before I could put my hands up to protect myself. It'd go and find a new pet, and probably keep looking until it found someone who could stand knowing that it was waiting just outside, watching it at all hours with its shiny, insect eyes. I've been thinking hard for the last few days, and I might just make a run for it.
When I was like 4 or 5, I once got locked in the girls' bathrooms of my kinder by a female janitor. It was around 12 p.m., the time where everyone had left school. Long story short, no one would hear my screams or punches to the door, until an old man in a suit opened the door and said, "You have to go now. But make sure you run as fast as you can," and so I did. There was a huge scandal because the woman that had me locked confessed she was being extortioned by some people to have kids kidnapped. But no one ever had seen or known any man like the one I described, and I never saw him again. Was a little kid at the time, not tired or anything, and was fidgeting in my bed trying to sleep when I heard the floorboards in the hallway leading to my room creak. I froze and looked towards the door, slowly covering my face with my blanket. I heard a deep voice go, "Should we take him?" At this point I'm scared as hell but am making no noise, holding my breath and silently panicking. A deeper voice responded, "No, he's still awake," and I fucking went crazy panicking. I must have stayed there trying to not move for several hours before passing out. Still scared to this day. I've got more stories I'll post when I get home, but this is one of the scariest. Now this is where shit heats up. There used to be a group of kids that would take their dirt bikes beyond the creek, and would go riding way out in the desert. One day they didn't come home and everyone assumed they had just gotten lost. They were found a week later, all 5 of them. They were alive, with no food and no water out in the Australian outback for a week. What scared me was what one of the kids' younger brother told me. He said that his brother had said they saw a light out in the desert, and they felt compelled to follow it. He said he felt like he was in a trance, and they didn't stop following this light for the entire week they were out in the outback. He said no matter how far they kept traveling they didn't seem to get anywhere close to it. He said if the farmer that found them hadn't have found them they never would have stopped following the light, and eventually would have died.
If you have never seen it, Ghost Stories from Japan is an anthology series mimicking the trademarks of Asian horror into 5-minute shorts. Something of a cult favorite among minor league thrill seekers and scary movie junkies, it was only but a few months ago that I discovered the show during one of my late-night YouTube binges. The episode that I watched, called The Stink, was a charmingly creepy bit that hooked me into the array of low-quality GSFJ rips that have appeared on YouTube. After watching a few of the shorts, I found myself dissatisfied with the poor resolution of the YouTube uploads and decided to try to seek out a decent torrent. The Pirate Bay proved fruitless, as did my usual fallbacks ISO Hunt and Torrent Reactor. Never patient enough to join a private tracker, I instead suited myself to ransack the search results of various sites and engines for an hour or so, making very few notable finds along the way, a couple of deleted files, a seemingly similar American series from the 90s hosted by Rip Torn. Then, right as I was about to call it quits, I stumbled upon something interesting. Deep within the Bing search results was a torrent hosted to a tracker I had never heard of, as Rip. The file was named Atarashi Gosudo Satori. I did a quick run through Google Translate and found that the title meant New Ghost Story, and, seeing as Ghost Stories from Japan contains the subtitle New Collection, I found myself filled with cautious excitement. Making a hasty glance over the site, I found that nearly all of the torrents were titled in Japanese or Korean. A few more pastes into Google Translate revealed torrents for a diversity of programs, including Hey Arnold, Twin Peaks, and something that translated into Thumb. Making a generous assumption for the website's legitimacy, I loaded the new Ghost Story torrent into Views. The file downloaded at a surprisingly fast rate, something I had not expected due to the seemingly fake nature of the seed/leech stats on the site, 2814 despite the website's obscurity. At the time chalked it up to the site being more accessible on Japanese search engines. The folder contained in the torrent was filled with somewhere around 30 useless files, including some blank .rtfs and a couple of terribly compressed JPG scans of Japanese DVD booklets. A bit of scrolling revealed that the torrent actually contained only a single eponymous ABI file. Disappointed but still curious, I dragged the video into VLC to find out what it was. To my surprise, the video actually began with the typical Ghost Stories from Japan intro, which depicts a series of handprints loudly pummeling the screen. Immediately after the title card finished, it cut to some indecipherable murky shaky cam footage that lasted for what was at least 30 seconds. Perplexed, I leaned into the screen in an attempt to understand what was going on, only to be greeted with the episode's title shortly thereafter in the usual fashion of the series. The white Japanese letters were quickly followed by an English subtitle, which read Maiko. A little while after this, the camera began to stop shaking, though the footage never cut. Figuring that the episode was filmed in the found footage style, I continued watching. The video seemed to be shot in some kind of abandoned industrial building, such as a warehouse or a factory, and as the camera continued to become still, I noticed a few Japanese language signs and advertisements along the walls. This is where the video began to get disturbing. The screams of a girl in the distance became increasingly apparent as the cameraman continued through the building, and soon the man shooting the footage began to mutter to himself in Japanese. Neither the screams nor the talking were subtitled. Trying to decipher some of the few Japanese words that I know, I turned the volume up considerably, straining my ears to understand the cameraman. Suddenly the footage made an abrupt cut and the video revealed the girl, whose screams were now horrifically loud, being filmed by the camera in a dimly lit room. I turned the volume down as fast as I could, my heart beating at a ridiculous rhythm. Shocked by the sudden transition, it took me a while to realize what was going on in the footage. The girl, bound and completely naked on the floor, was yelling and sobbing at the cameraman, who replied very rarely and always calmly. At this point I was completely baffled. Even given the audacious nature of Japanese programming, there was virtually no way that a fully nude woman would ever make it onto an episode of a show like Ghost Stories from Japan. I watched for a while longer, considerably disgusted but still partially egged on by my curiosity, a little bit convinced that this was only some kind of unapproved, lost episode of the series that had barely skimped its way onto a Japanese bootleg. For a brief moment the camera began to shake once more as the man dropped it to his side and started walking across the room. When the video regained its focus, the cameraman was panning over a table. I cringed as I saw the array of crude surgical tools lined across the surface. Then, without warning, the footage made one more cut. I don't know exactly what I saw in those few seconds after the video jumped, but it was enough for me to quit out of VLC, delete the torrent, and clear my last hour's web history. The cameraman was filming a mess of red and tan strewn across the floor, slow and leisurely. Only, it wasn't a mess. Each limb of the young girl's body had been disconnected from the last, and then reassorted into the shape of a normal human body. Right as the camera finished its gradual profile of the remains, it made an intense zoom upon the girl's disembodied head, blank and expressionless. It was a face I could never forget. I had to take a break from the internet after that. No amount of searches, message board posts, or forum queries ever clarified my confusion. ASRIP was the first thing that I looked for when I returned to the web, and it had disappeared from thin air. Only a small development came in light of the video. Roughly a week after the incident, I found a completely unmarked package in my apartment mail slot. It contained only one thing, buried under a quantity of styrofoam packing peanuts. A simple Polaroid photo of the dead girl's face, the same cold expression and the same big glassy eyes. One word was scrawled in Sharpie at the bottom of the image, 1 to 2, ghost.